Welcome to iPad Pros, the show all about using your iPad to be productive and get work done. I'm Tim Chen, host of the show.
So when I come to the office, it will change my home screen to sort of work-based with the appropriate widgets and appropriate apps on the home screen. And then when I go home in the evening, it will change to more leisure-based stuff on the home screen. And more importantly, I've got it set that when I open Fourscore, which is my music reading app, it actually blocks out everyone. No one can contact me when I've got that up, so that I'm not going to ever have the embarrassing situation of even my iPhone ringing when I'm playing in a concert, for example. So I don't need to think to switch off the phone or whatever, because as soon as I've opened Fourscore, it's in that focus, and all my devices will not receive any notifications.
Welcome back to another episode of iPad Pros. We're joined today by Jonathan Hodgetts, the President of Wessex Tubas. Wessex Tubas was established in 2010, and they have now expanded to offering not only tubas, but a full range of brass instruments as well as saxophones. In this interview, we dive into the nitty-gritty of building the business and creating musical instruments, plus how he runs his company from the iPad Pro. With that said, I just want to remind everyone that you can now financially support iPad Pros in two different places. First off, patreon.com/iPadPros. Get episodes early and with embedded MP3 chapter markers by supporting the podcast at any tier. Bonus content is also available at the higher tiers. You can also now subscribe to iPad Pros in Apple Podcasts. Apple Podcasts is an all-inclusive single subscription, so you'll get all of the bonus content plus episodes early by subscribing to the show in Apple Podcasts. By default, subscriptions are monthly, but if you go into your subscription settings in the Settings app, you can switch it to a yearly plan. My thanks to everyone that currently or has in the past supported the podcast financially. This podcast is not a quick one to produce, and your support is greatly, greatly appreciated. You can also support the podcast for free simply by leaving a review in Apple Podcasts. No matter your region, it really does help. The reviews help send the right signals to Apple to show this podcast more in search, helping others discover the show. If you have a minute today, I'd really appreciate you opening up the podcast app and leaving a review. My thanks to everyone that has already done that. With that, here's my interview with Jonathan. Enjoy. Welcome to the podcast, Jonathan.
Oh, thanks, Tim. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. I'm very excited to chat with you today. As I was looking more and more into what your company does, it's something that relates directly to me. And you guys create brass instruments as well as saxophones. And I've been playing music since probably fourth grade with the recorder back then. And it'll be a fun chat, I think.
Well, it's great to be speaking to another musician.
And so can you first kind of introduce yourself? What's your background and what your current iPad setup is?
Well, I'm Jonathan Hodgetts. I'm the President of Wessex Tubas. And at the moment, I have got iPad Pro, the latest M1 12.9 inch, and a iPad Mini 6, which I've recently acquired.
Excellent. And your company, Wessex Tubas, started kind of the same year as the iPad was introduced. And I'm just kind of curious, how'd you get into creating instruments?
I've been a musician since I was 12 years old. I started playing the tuba when I was 12 years old, and I expect we'll go into that a bit more later. But and then in 2007, I met a Chinese wife. I was over in China a lot, and it occurred to me on one of my visits that there's manufacturing facilities there that can make brass musical instruments. And with my wife obviously being a fluent Chinese speaker, we're well put to actually go around and negotiate contracts and such like. So we started going around and visiting various factories, and that's how we got into starting manufacturing and Wessex Tubas.
That's really cool. Yeah. And I love just the full range of, especially saxophones you guys provide. You have, the tiny sopranino to a bass saxophone, which I played a fair bit of that in high school in a little saxophone ensemble. And I remember just the oxygen head rushes I got from the amount of sheer wind you need to pump through those things.
Yes, they're quite a beast, they are.
Yeah. So what's your approach to the instruments you create? How are you different from the other guys out there?
I think the difference is that so many companies just get instruments imported from China, and they're just standard ones from a range. And what we've done, we've actually gone into design and developing our own range of instruments. And through my contacts with my wife, and we've got such a close relationship with the manufacturing facility that we can basically produce exactly as we want. So ours are individually designed and created by musicians that know what they're looking for.
Yeah. And your background was as a tuba player growing up, is that right?
Yes, I've been playing tuba since I was 12. And the company started off just creating tubas. I started off just selling tubas. But it was very soon I got people coming to me and saying, "Oh, can you make this? Can you make that?" And the range, bit by bit, has increased over the years. To now we do the whole range of the brass musical instruments. Although tubas are still the sort of core of it,
Yeah,
the largest range. And most recently, we've been adding saxophones because the son of my warehouse manager is a saxophone player in the band of the Scots Guards, and he's been advising me on saxophone development. And no doubt when he leaves the military band, he may come to be working for the company full time then. But for the moment, it's just like on an informal basis in his spare time.
Yeah. No, the saxophone range is pretty interesting. You have like a curved soprano saxophone, and then, as I mentioned, the bass saxophone, and standard tenor and alto and stuff. Have you guys looked into like metal clarinets or flutes, or is the metal itself important? Does it matter that these are brass instruments? Like if you want to make a silver-plated saxophone, that'd be a bit harder.
We could make other woodwind instruments, but it's like one stage at a time, really. I don't want to move on to any other woodwind instruments until we're fully satisfied with the saxophone development. And that could be, maybe if you come back in 5-10 years' time, we will have moved into clarinets and flutes and etc.
Yeah. So what did you love about the tuba? What attracted you to it as a child?
I think it was just its deep sound. It appealed to me, and it's large. When I was a kid, I always seemed to like large things. Like my favourite animals, the elephants, and the tuba just epitomised what I liked about things, and I wanted a big musical instrument, and the tuba was it.
Yeah. Yeah, something I love about really large instruments is they also have the biggest range. You can actually play really high notes if you're really good at the instrument. That happens with the string instruments as well as the wind instruments. I know in the bass saxophone you can go pretty high if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, that's quite true. The tuba's got a range of four octaves for me, but I guess 5 for a real top professional.
Yeah,
5 octaves, that is.
Right. So do you guys have? Do you personally have a favorite specialty instrument that your company creates?
I think one of my favourites is the tornister tuba. Now, no, you probably will not know what a tornister tuba is. That's in German. It stands for backpack tuba. And it was an instrument that was originally made in the late 19th century for the Austro-Hungarian army. And I came across one and put it back into production after over 100 years gap. And that was really the sort of first original instrument that Wessex Tubas brought out. So it was completely different from what anyone else was making. And I still got great affection for that. It's like my first special instrument. Yeah,
and do you find the ergonomics better for that than, say, I think they're called sousaphones? What were the ones that, like, as a circle around a player?
Sousaphones go around you and the bell's like above your head.
Yeah.
There's also the Helican, which is, the bell is smaller and it doesn't go up above your head. And those, I prefer the Helican to the sousaphone. But then I know sousaphones are big in American marching bands and military bands and such like, but I find them a bit unwieldy to carry. So I prefer the Helicon, which is a bit smaller.
So your company manufactures things, obviously, and we're in this period where the global supply chain and raw materials are a bit, how should we say, scarce and limited. How has this affected your company, and has the portable nature of the iPad helped you, be able to be more responsive kind of anywhere you are in the world?
Well, we haven't so much suffered problems with raw materials. Obviously, in the early days of the pandemic, production came to a complete halt for some months. And so, but then the biggest problem we've had since then is the problems of not being able to travel. And so I can't, at the moment, get to the factory to actually put any new models into production or to actually go and sort of supervise things directly.
Yeah.
So, thank goodness for technology and video chats and etc. But travel has been the biggest problem. The iPad has not really, using an iPad has not really been a big bonus at this time because I really haven't been moving around much.
Right, yeah, you're more stationary because of this, yeah.
In normal times outside the pandemic, it's a huge benefit because I am on the road maybe half the year. And so using an iPad is a great advantage.
Yeah, during those times, would you have cellular access? I know like the current iPads has dual SIM, so would you have like your local SIM and then wherever you're traveling, you have a SIM there for the local data connection?
Ever since my second iPad and my first iPad Pro, I have had cellular versions. Obviously, it has been 4G, and now with the most recent one, 5G. And I have in the States got an American eSIM, had like a physical UK card and an American eSIM card in my iPad at the same time. So I obviously can use the local network then and not have roaming charges.
That's great. Yeah. That's something I'm really happy that came to the iPad, because that seems like a super big win, especially if you travel to the same place over and over again. So if you're coming to the States to visit the Chicago showroom, or I'm not sure if China has a similar situation where you could have a local SIM there.
I have tried SIM cards in China, but I found them a bit restrictive in use because the Chinese firewall that certain things like Google cannot be accessed. So I found it really quite annoying. I tried it once. And never bothered to renew the contract, which was just like a month. And I never renewed it because I didn't find it a great benefit.
Yeah, but if you're roaming in China, you don't have those firewalls.
No, not using my local card. If I use my UK card, I don't have the problem with the firewalls.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
To reach the West.
Yeah.
And I tend to, when I'm in China, use the cellular all the time. I rarely use the Wi-Fi.
Yeah. And so something I'm curious about is you entered this market in 2010. What's the process been like for building out the ambassador and artist program? Kind of a very important thing, I'd imagine, trying to enter this very well-established market. I remember in school, Yamaha was king, and I'd imagine this is a hard market to kind of penetrate and kind of get name brand recognition with.
Well, one of the things I've been doing is, as I've been traveling around, particularly around the States, is visiting some of the top players in the world, and that's one of the things I really enjoy about the job is meeting great musicians all around the world. And obviously, if they're interested in the brand and want to help us develop it, then we will see if they'd like to join us as an artist. But we don't push it too much. They've really got to want to do it. Otherwise, there's no much point in bringing them along if their heart's not in it. Yeah.
Would you create a custom instrument for any of the artists you work with as kind of like a bonus type thing? We'll create this kind of custom thing with your kind of specifications that are a bit different.
Yes, we would. Yes. So often we do developments with feedback from various professionals, and so we may well develop a new instrument in collaboration with a professional player, which then is added to our range.
Nice, yeah. So the blog posts A lot of variety there and a lot of great content there. Do you create any of those yourselves, or do you have a person that kind of focuses on the blog and does all that?
I have done the occasional one, but most of them are done by my marketing lady. She writes them, sends them to me for approval, and before they go up, and she does a very good job, I think.
Yeah, they're great. And so your company is based out, was it London, you mentioned?
Well, the actual headquarters here is 60 miles west of London.
Okay.
And that's where warehouse is and the main office. And then we've got a showroom in Chicago. And we've got a sort of affiliate in Texas as well.
And is the affiliate, is that where all the shipping's done? Because I noticed there is local shipping in the States, which is great, and it's actually free shipping if you're in the United States, which I just love that you offer that.
No, what they handle is all dealing with all the school orders in the States.
Okay.
The shipping we actually do from the warehouse in the UK, and I've in the past had a separate warehouse in the States. But then we've got to keep two inventories
right.
in two different continents, and it always seems to be that the instruments are not where you want them. That in America wants it, and the only ones available is in the UK or vice versa.
Yeah,
and then the advantage is lost. And in the end, we decided there's no point in having two warehouses. Just keep the one. And surprisingly, the shipping costs from the UK to the States is very little more than internally within the States, which is quite amazing.
It is, yeah.
And also, it's quicker as well. People have not been able to believe it that they've ordered an instrument. We get the order come through, say, 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the UK, and they've got it at 9 o'clock the next morning in the States.
Amazing. Yeah, logistics, it's come a long way.
I think part of the reason is it then comes across by air flights, where if we were shipping around the States, it would be by ground, which would be a lot slower.
Yeah. So where did the inspiration for the logo come from? This is something I imagine is pretty important in this industry because it's kind of embroidered into the instruments themselves and becomes kind of part of the product's DNA.
Right. Well, firstly, the name Wessex.
Yeah, that too.
That came from the fact that I was located where the business will start in a road called Wessex Gardens, which actually is in the ancient kingdom of Wessex, which was a part of England 1,000 years ago. And basically, it was about 3 months after the company started. I had no real logo to start with, and then just had the idea. I wonder what the flag of Wessex looked like, and we just did some research, and the logo basically is an extract from the flag of Wessex, which was a kingdom of 1,000 years ago.
That's really cool. Yeah, I love kind of the heritage of that. That's great.
And that's where it came from. More recent times, we sort of made it a bit more elaborate and such like, to make it look, the engraving on the instrument more fancy, because people like that. They like a nice fancy engraving on the bell. But that's where it all comes from.
Yeah. For your personal tuba, do you have a favorite one that's just standard, or did you have something custom made that's kind of like just special for you?
I tend to, the instruments I play vary. When's a new instrument developed, I may well use it for a couple of months myself. If it's a tuba, I'll play it myself for a couple of months first before it goes in production. I find there's no better way to find any flaws than to actually put it to day-to-day use. So the instrument that I'm playing varies and will change over a period of time. And literally, I can have a different one virtually every week.
Yeah,
which is a lovely situation to be in.
It is, yeah. So, anything else broadly about the company itself before we jump into the iPad itself and how you use it for your work? The only thing is the company's still quite small.
I've only got a total of 5 staff, so it's quite a small operation. And unlike most companies, we have taken an approach at selling direct to our end customer, and that means we can keep our prices down because there's no middleman to add their amount on for the sale.
Yeah, that's something I noticed. Like, you can go on your website and Apple Pay to purchase right there. And that's something I looked just, again, before the interview. It's like, oh, Yamaha, you can't buy direct. Selmer, you can't buy direct. It's always through somebody else. And as you said, the middlemen, they like to jack up the prices a bit. And if you did have like a comparable, like with the Sax one, were you targeting a certain like quality range compared to like Selmer, Yamaha? What's the comparison there to make?
I would say we're aiming for like the more skilled amateur rather than the professional.
Yeah,
that's where the biggest market is.
Yeah,
there are very few professional players against amateur players, but so we're aiming above the beginner market, but below the top professional markets. So that's sort of intermediate level.
Great. Yeah. I was looking at the Selmer Paris saxophone that I own, and the prices have just skyrocketed since I got it, like probably 10, 15 years ago. I'm not sure if it's partly exchange rate or just the prices are just going up probably. But
having said that, there are some instruments we have actually gone to a more high level, to top professional level. So I got a dedicated team actually making those instruments, all made by hand.
Oh wow, that's really cool. And is that currently just in the Tuba range?
That's just in the Tuba range, yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So on the iPad itself, so when did you first use the iPad, and what kind of attracts you to it over something like the Mac?
Well, I was first introduced to the iPad by my wife. She wanted an iPad. This was probably back in soon after it came out in, was it 2011, I think?
Yeah, 2010 actually. Yep. So yeah, pretty close there.
Yeah. Well, soon after that, she got one, and it's ideal for Chinese people because you can, obviously with the touch screen, they can just write on the screen with the Chinese characters. And even in those early days, the iPad could actually read those Chinese characters, and so she could actually write with her finger on there before the Apple Pencil came out. And I saw that, and I thought it would be a great device for playing music from.
Yeah.
And so I got an iPad Air. I think it was probably the first iPad Air.
Mm-hmm.
And I started playing music from it, and really quite enjoyed it. Apart from the size of the screen was really too small, because some of the manuscripts are letter size or even a bit larger. And when you shrink it down to a 9.7-inch iPad screen, It can be a bit small to read. So I was really excited when I heard that Apple was bringing out the 12.9-inch iPad Pro. And I was probably one of the first people to order. I watched the event online and ordered it within 5 minutes of it being available for ordering.
Yeah.
So I think that was November 2015. I got my first iPad Pro. But that was a wonderful device, and I moved all my music library across to that straight away. But within a couple of months, I started thinking, well, this would be nice to start using for the business as well. So I then added the Folio keyboard, which came with the early one, the one that's folded up. The origami. Origami, yeah. But it worked, and I got one of those and started using the iPad Pro for business as well. And that is how I really came to be using the iPad Pro.
So the kind of modular nature of just being able to yank off the screen to use it as sheet music is like one of the things initially that got you into it, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes, one of the problems I was having before that was I was always seemed to be losing music, or I was the first one, or rather I was the last one in the band to be able to find my music.
Yeah,
it's very embarrassing keeping everyone waiting. So And ever since I scanned the music and put it on my iPad Pro, or my original iPad Air, I'm the first one with the music up when everything's called out.
Yeah. And do you scan the music with some kind of scan snap type thing, or are you using just the built-in scanner now, which is part of iOS?
In the early days, I scanned the music with a flatbed scanner in the office, but then I started scanning with the iPad using the built-in camera on the iPad straight into it.
Yeah.
And nowadays I use the app Scanner Pro, which I use for scanning all the music, which I find quite amazing the way it sort of corrects it and makes it into a flat sheet of paper. It's amazing how these scanning programs work on the iPad.
Yeah. Does Fourscore itself have scanning built in yet?
It does now. It didn't when I started using it. It has got a built-in scanner now, but
the quality is just not up there.
It still doesn't do as good a job as the Scanner Pro app does. So I still use the Scanner Pro app.
Nice, yeah. And do you have any kind of special stand that you mount your iPad into, or is it just a standard sheet music stand and hopefully no one knocks into it and the iPad goes tumbling?
I got a special stand now. In the early days, I just used to put it on the music stand. But after having it once knocked off onto the floor, lucky it didn't break the glass. It just chipped the edge of it. It just put a little dent in the aluminium rim. But I've actually got a purpose iPad stand, which is by a company called K&M, which specialise in making music stands and such like musical instrument stands as well.
Nice.
That I find really good. I can use it in portrait or landscape, whichever is appropriate for the music I'm playing.
And to turn the pages, do you have one of those Bluetooth pedals?
I have got one, but I don't always use it, because you can just touch the screen to turn it, and I find that sufficient in most cases.
Yeah.
Unless there's a very difficult page turn on a particular piece, but probably 95% of the time I just do it by hand.
Okay. And the screen size, is this sufficient, or would you go to a 15-inch if they bumped it just a little bit more?
I think it probably is sufficient, but I would probably be ordering on the first day if Apple ever brought out a 15-inch one or a larger size.
Yeah. So the Mac, you have an iMac at the office. Kind of what role does that serve in your life?
Very, very little now. It's most days it sits there with a black screen and never gets touched all day. It's just the occasional use when there's a problem with using the iPad, which is not that often.
And in those early days of iPad Pro, what were those biggest challenges of using the iPad to get your job done?
Well, in the early days, I would be using the iMac when I was in the office, and the iPad was just purely as a portable device. That's how it started off. And I did used to have a MacBook Pro as well. So I would go around with a MacBook Pro as well. And in those early days, what it could do was very limited. One of the amazing things that you could not do in those days was, for example, make a PDF. If I wanted to make a PDF of a document, it had no built-in facility to actually make a PDF. So that's how I started listening to iPad podcasts and YouTube videos and such like, to actually try and learn more about what could be done on the iPad Pro and ways around its shortcomings, what apps could be used to overcome those shortcomings. So I've been studying that right from 2016, and any app that I thought might make my workflow a bit better, I've been adding onto it, and that's how things have developed. As time's gone on, obviously Apple have added extra facilities, and some of those apps have just disappeared because they're not required anymore.
Yeah. So broadly speaking, what computing tasks do you need to do as the president of Wessex Tubas? And we'll dive deeper into the specifics in a bit, but just broadly speaking, what kind of day-to-day things are you doing?
Emails is obviously quite a large thing. There's quite a lot of messages coming in, both internally and externally. I work on spreadsheets quite a lot. You've got to I'll get spreadsheets off our shopping software of all the sales, and I'll need to analyse and decide what we're going to order, stock in, etc. So those are big ways. Documents, I created documents as well, which are largely like the specifications of the instruments for the factory, and that's quite important to get that they know exactly what they're doing and what I'm expecting from them.
And with the specifications, you're not like drawing out schematics. You're what is entailed with specifications for an instrument?
No, it's not generally that detailed. It's just going to be the specifications of anything after the first prototype, which I want changing.
Okay. For doing that first prototype, do you do drawings, or how do you kind of come about a design for an instrument?
We often start with something that already exists. It may be one from the past, like 100 years old, like the Tornister Tuba, and we'll work from that. I've got a chief designer. His name's Chuck Nichols, and he's in Oregon, and he will literally build the instrument, and then eventually, when we're satisfied with the way it plays, it then goes to the factory to actually measure up and do the blueprints before a factory prototype is produced. Then that will come back for approval. We'll make any further modifications before it goes into production.
Is 3D printing something you guys utilize at all, or in that early phases, is he making things from metal?
No, it's making things from metal.
Okay.
In more recent times, or pre-pandemic times, I should say, really, we have done a lot of the actual development at the factory itself as well. Mm-hmm. So actually try putting something together, then modifying it, and testing it out and modifying it further at the factory.
Yeah.
Because obviously the facilities for making the components are a lot greater than my designer's got.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense, yeah. And besides upgrading to the XDR iPad Pro this year, you also added an iPad mini to the mix, this new 6th generation one that I've seen in person, and I'm really envious of not having one yet. So how have these two devices affected your workflow, both the XDR iPad Pro and then the new mini?
The iPad Pro, obviously the much better screen on the new one is really good when I'm doing video editing or photo editing. So that's where the main use is for the better screen is on the new XDR screen. And it's got no problem in handling 4K videos. It's never hiccuped on me ever. So it's
and this was an upgrade from the 2018 iPad Pro, right?
Yes. Yeah, I've now had 4 iPad Pros. I started off with the very first one, but when they first brought the iPad Pro out, it only had 64 gigabytes of memory, and that was the only one available. So I then changed to the second edition, more than anything to get more memory, and I went straight up from 64 gigabytes up to 500 odd gigabytes on the second one.
Yeah, I made the mistake of just financially 32 gigabytes was all I could afford for the original iPad Pro, so I went from 32 to 512, and that was a nice big jump for me.
I like to have, I always tend to go for the largest amount of space on there, because when I'm traveling, I like to carry everything with me, and I don't want it's spread around on separate drives. So I basically got my whole all my business documents and my personal documents as well on the iPad Pro. So there's a lot of stuff on there. So I went up to 512, but obviously that was still the old format with the huge bezels. Mm-hmm. And then I got the 2018 one. And that went up to 1 terabyte.
Yeah.
And that made it a lot more portable and easy to carry around with the smaller bezels. That's a huge difference, I think. And now I'm using the latest one on a 2 terabyte one. So I've gone all the way up now to 2 terabytes.
Amazing. Yeah, it's amazing where we started and where we are now storage-wise with these things.
And the first one is long since gone, but the second one is still being used by my warehouse manager. and my 2018 one is being used by my wife. So
Nice.
they're still in use.
Yeah. So the iPad Mini, or first before you get to the iPad Mini, has the addition of the trackpad on the iPad been a big help with your workflows?
I don't know if it's really made any difference the way I use the device that much.
Yeah.
The trackpad I tend to use more, I think, for gestures rather than for selecting things on, buttons or items on the screen. I tend to still reach to the screen to do those things, but I will swipe up and swipe across and such like with the touchpad. So it's like dual use for me.
Yeah. And then the Mini. So this is a brand new device. You have not had a Mini in your life up until now. And how are you finding that you're using this?
Well, the Mini, one of my interests is drone flying. So I originally got the Mini with the idea of using it for flying drones, because I was finding looking at an iPhone screen a bit small when I'm flying. I wanted a larger screen, so I got the iPad Mini for that. But it's really turned into be a much more useful device than that. It's virtually replaced my iPhone altogether. I hardly touch my iPhone anymore. The iPad Mini goes around with me everywhere. It's a much nicer format and size of screen, I think, for use on the go. If you want to look at a spreadsheet, the iPhone is just too small, but you can on
just the aspect ratio alone just seems not
the aspect it's so narrow.
Yeah,
some of the spreadsheets I can't even use at all on the iPhone, but the iPad Mini I can basically look at anything that I can on the iPad Pro. It's obviously not as large and as pleasant to use, but it can be used for virtually anything. So it tends to now go with me everywhere, and I'm using it for even on my desk beside the iPad Pro. I've got the iPad Pro there I'm using, and I have the iPad Mini beside it as well. And I use that for reference. If I just want to look up something I will just open it up on the iPad Mini to do a lookup, rather than do a split screen on the iPad Pro. So I'm actually finding, since I got the Mini, I'm not using split screen so much on the iPad Pro now.
Yeah, I would do the same thing with I had the 10.5 inch and the 12.9 of the second generation, and I would use them side by side exactly like that. And it'd be so cool if universal control could work from an iPad to another iPad, because I think that would be very handy if they ever managed to do that.
Although it's great, the handover, you can just copy something on one device and then paste it on the other.
That's super handy.
I use that all the time, every day.
And you're using the Magic Keyboard with the iPad Pro in this setup, or do you have like a stand and like a desktop kind of setup for your iPad?
I'm actually using, when I'm on my desk, I actually have got a stand. I've got it on the stand, and I've got a regular Apple keyboard and a touchpad.
Okay. Did you ever look into getting one of those Bluetooth keyboards that would let you pair to both the Mini and the regular iPad Pro, so you could just swap between for the keyboard to jump back and forth?
No, I haven't thought about doing that, actually.
Okay. Yeah, that's something I really enjoyed doing when I had my dual kind of setup there.
The reason I'm using a stand. The stand I'm using is one called a Lulu stand. It's magnetic, so it just clips on magnetically. And what I like about that is that I can just switch it from landscape to portrait.
Yeah.
So I can use it in either format, whichever is best for what I'm doing.
Nice. And you're finding the Lulu stand nice and stable. You're not worried about it tipping. Good.
Yeah. That's the only advantage I really see to the Magic Keyboard. But if I'm working anywhere outside from my office desk, it's on the Magic Keyboard.
Yeah, that thing's great. How easy it is to just take on and off at will.
Yeah. So, and of course, then it comes off to be used as a tablet when it goes on the stand for playing music.
Yeah.
I don't tend to use it as a tablet so much otherwise. The iPad Pro, I won't be like sitting on the sofa with it in my hands as a tablet. But I do that with the Mini all the time.
Yeah, it's the perfect size for that. It just feels right at home for being an iPad.
It's just so good. You just hold it in one hand and and use the other one hand to navigate around, which is ideal, and it doesn't feel any heavier than the iPhone Pro Max that I had before.
And so the Pro Max, you then went to the 13 Mini, and how are you finding the little tiny phone?
I find it okay, actually. Like I say, I'm not using it much for screen time, so I'm more using it as a phone, I guess you could say, really.
Probably a phone and camera, probably.
And such things as navigation or taking a quick picture and things like that. I tend to use the iPhone for now.
In not needing to tether on the big phone, do you think you'll stick with this 13 Mini if they don't upgrade to a 14 Mini in the coming year?
Yeah, I think now I may well stay with the 13 Mini for a few years now.
Yeah,
because it's a good device. Like I say, I'm not using it. It's not heavy usage. I'm just using it very infrequently. I'm mostly using the iPad Mini, so the battery life on the iPhone Mini is no problem at all.
Yeah,
and of course, you have got the you can actually charge the iPhone from the iPad Mini as well as from the iPad Pro.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because the charging thing, it's not just iPad Pro. iPad Mini can also do that trick as well. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's one of the first things I checked out. So do I need to carry a charger, or can I just charge up the phone from the iPad Mini? And
yeah,
it works fine.
And I'll charge my Apple Watch from my iPad Pro as well. That's a pretty handy thing to do.
Yeah. And the iPad Pro, I find the battery life mostly okay. The early days when I got my first one, the charger, I can't remember what it was on the charger they provided with it. It was only something like 12 watts or something.
Yeah, it took them a while to upgrade that thing.
And that was way too slow. I had to buy a bigger charger to actually charge it up in time, because I was like, it wasn't recharged again before I wanted to disconnect it and move on. Yeah.
So email, you mentioned, is a big deal running a company. And what kind of apps did you try out, and what did you finally settle on?
Right. Well, I started off with when the company started, I started off using Google. That's where we started from. But of course, you use it on Safari or whatever. You obviously want to be writing when you're not connected to the internet as well.
Yeah.
So and the Google mobile app, I think, is not very good at all. The one that's on for the iPad, I'm not very impressed with that. I did use Apple Mail for a while, but it's much more limited than it is on the Mac.
Yeah.
You've got facilities on the Mac which are just not, even now today, Apple has still not provided all the mail facilities on the iPad app. I've used AirMail. That was okay, but it wouldn't do everything I wanted. I've also tried Hey, which is quite an interesting one with a different way of doing things. But Hey, I think is okay for personal use, but I don't think it's much good for business use. That's my take of it.
Yeah.
And much the same applies. I've tried Spike. And that's another one which I think okay for personal use, but you won't want to use it for business. So the one I settled on, the one I've been using now consistently for more than a year is Spark, and that's what I'm using now.
And what are some of your favorite features within Spark? What attracts you to it?
Well, one of the things that first attracted me is you can actually have a HTML signature in it.
Isn't this the most baffling thing in the world? When I for my last day job, I needed an HTML signature as a work requirement, and I must have tried every app in the store, and Spark was like the only one that could do this. Apple Mail, you could kind of hack it in, but it never looked right. Yeah,
the format all goes to pieces in Apple Mail. Yeah, but obviously I wanted a proper business signature in there, and HTML, and that was one of the sort of deciding factors for using it. Another one that I don't like with so many of the apps is you look at one email and then it moves on to the next one, even if you don't want to move on to the next one.
Yeah.
And then marks it as read, and then if you get called away, it's then disappeared off your ones waiting for attention then, and it's quite annoying. And In Spark, some of the other facilities I like is the fact that you can obviously, it sorts out your actual personal emails from notifications and newsletters and things like that, which so keeps them separate. That's so useful. And that you can time it for sending later or reminder to come back into your inbox in a week's time if you want to answer this later, and things like that. So it's got quite a few nice features in Spark. There are some things I don't like. One thing that particularly annoys me is you can select something, and if you select on the keyboard, Command C to copy it, it doesn't copy it. You've actually got to physically hold there and press the copy and get the copy on the screen. Why that doesn't work, I do not know. It's just one of those annoyances.
Yeah, I'll think I'd copy something and then come back. It's like, oh, Spark handles text a bit different.
Yeah, you just gone into the other app. You go to paste it and it's not there. And
yeah. Yeah, it's a bit. I hope they figure that out at some point.
Yeah.
What are the other roles within your company? So you mentioned a marketing and a designer. What else is there?
That's my customer services. Mm-hmm. Obviously, dealing with most of the customer inquiries. Warehouse manager, doing all the dispatching of the orders. I've got a professional artist, and he's actually a full-time employee, and he does do lots of demonstration videos for me and helps. We actually go around and visit places and put an exhibition, and he will give a masterclass and a recital, and that obviously pulls people in to then come and look at the instruments.
Yeah.
And then I've got an administrator doing all the accounts and that sort of thing.
Okay. So your calendar, what have you settled on for kind of managing that and making sure you're keeping up with all your appointments?
I use Fantastical, which is one I've been using for quite a while now, and that works for me. It's nice. It's quite familiar. It's not that different in appearance from the Apple calendar, but it has got some nice extra features.
And what's kind of the most useful stuff that they added to the app that you don't get with the built-in app?
Well, one of the reasons I first started using it was a simple thing. You could add attachments to a calendar appointment, which you can't do on the calendar on the iPad, although you can on the calendar on the Mac. Another inconsistency, which I don't know why Apple have not corrected.
Yeah.
But I also like the intelligent data entry. You can just put like free text, meet so-and-so 10 a.m. and it will put it in at 10 a.m. and you don't have to go through all these different fields to do it. And I like the reminders integration as well. So I can actually add and respond to reminders in Calendar rather than having to go into the Reminders app. In fact, I never go into the Reminders app. I do all of my reminders through Fantastical.
So you use the reminders back end kind of as your way of keeping track of the reminders. You don't have some like big or OmniFocus or Things app that you outsource to.
I've used Things in the past, but I didn't really find that it provided any great advantage to me over the built-in Reminders app. So I went back to Reminders again.
Okay. Widgets within Fantastical. Are you finding that useful? That's one of my favorite things about the Fantastical app is their amazing widget support.
Yeah, I use that is a feature on my homepage all the time, the Fantastical widget. I also got on there the Spark widget as well, so I can see the latest emails come in. The other one that is a permanent fixture of widgets on my home screen is Carrot Weather.
Yeah. And do you have within there like destinations? Well, in the normal times, would you have in there like Chicago and the place in China that you would visit as like locations that you're just aware of?
Yes. Yeah, I would.
And the focus mode within iPadOS 15, have you done much with that? Do you have custom home screens for different kind of contexts that you're in to have different apps and widgets set up there?
Yes, I have. I do. I am using Focus. I find that a great thing. So when I come to the office, it will change my home screen to sort of work-based with the appropriate widgets and appropriate apps on the home screen. And then when I go home in the evening, it will change to more leisure-based stuff on the home screen. Mm-hmm. And more importantly, I've got it set that when I open Fourscore, which is my music reading app, it actually blocks out everyone. No one can contact me when I've got that up, so that I'm not going to ever have the embarrassing situation of even my iPhone ringing when I'm playing in a concert, for example.
That's great.
So I don't need to think to switch off the phone or whatever, because as soon as I've opened Fourscore, that is in that focus, and all my devices will not receive any notifications.
And you mentioned earlier that you use spreadsheets and kind of documents. What app have you settled on for the spreadsheet end of things?
I've just kept with the built-in numbers app. I use Numbers and Pages because we're not trying to do anything really elaborate. They tend to be tables of inventory or sales or spreadsheets, orders, and various things like that. And the numbers will fulfill that role quite satisfactorily. And
do you do much with the collaboration within Numbers or Pages, or is it just documents that you're being sent and can review independently?
No, using them shared all the time. We've got like various shared spreadsheets which can be accessed by the appropriate members of the team. So multiple people updating those spreadsheets.
Nice. Yeah. Very cool. Keynote presentations is not something you've had to do much of, at least at this point in your business.
Keynote is not something I use very often. There has been occasional presentations, but it's not something I'll go into once a year.
Yeah. For the website itself, do you manage any of that yourself, or is that someone else's role?
Well, the website is all based on Shopify shopping app, which works quite well on the iPad. There's no problems there. There is a Shopify app, but I can also access through Safari to go into the back end as well. I've got a webmaster who does any major updates if we want to change the format of the website or whatever. But any sort of day-to-day changes, be it prices or add in photos or add in a new product or whatever, I can do that directly on the iPad Pro, no problem at all.
Oh, very cool. And Shopify, it also handles the blog itself. It's a platform that can do your entire site, or are there aspects of the site that are elsewhere?
No, they can handle the blog as well.
That's really cool. Yeah, I actually didn't. I thought it was mainly just for a store, but yeah, that's a really nice site, and that's cool that platform does it all. For the website versus the app, have you found certain tasks better with the app, and then certain tasks you'll go to the website version of Shopify, or is it pretty seamless no matter which version you use?
Well, the app you probably use if you just want to sort of add an order on or just check on an order, because it's quite easy to just go in and do that. But if it was anything like modifying a product, I go in through Safari into the back end that way.
Mm-hmm. And then your website also integrates with Tidio for the live chat to do customer service right there on the website. Is that a friendly tool to use on the iPad?
Well, there is an iPad Tidio app, and all the chats that come in, any chats that come in, do come. I use the app. I don't do that on the Safari. That's done for the app, and it works fine. There's no problem. The only criticism of it is it doesn't have dark mode. So it can be a bit training on the eyes if it's after dark.
Yeah, and you'll do some of that, but you also have a customer service person that's their kind of focus of what they do.
The customer service person will do that most of the time.
Yeah.
But sometimes they're not available, and I know they're not going to be available, and then I'll keep an eye on it and attend to it then. So
in the dark days, I know a lot of people had to use Windows because of Quicken for Windows and how good it was. What does accounting look like from an iPad? What kind of solution have you found there?
Well, I've from quite the early days of the company, I've used Xero, so that's what we're using here. And there's quite a good Xero's app for the iPad. That works quite well. And once again, you can access through Safari or through the app. The app I tend to use for such things as just add an invoice or a bill, that sort of thing. And But for anything more than that, I would go into the Safari, so I use that for more elaborate things.
Okay. Communication apps in general, outside of email, what other things are you using on the iPad?
Well, a big one is WeChat. WeChat is a Chinese app which basically all Chinese seem to use.
Yeah.
I've never met anyone from China who has not got WeChat.
Yeah, it runs basically their whole country in many ways.
And so that is my main communication with my factory in China. And so for messages, video chats, basically everything go through WeChat, which is and somehow it seems to work in China a lot better than other communication methods.
And the iPad iteration of the app's pretty decent?
Yes, it's fine. The only limitation is it can only be on one iPhone and one iPad.
Okay. So your Mini and your Pro can't both have it.
They can't both have it. And I've actually now moved it from my Pro onto my iPad Mini because that tends to be with me more of the time. So.
Okay. Yeah. And does your Mini have cellular? I forget.
Yes.
It does. Okay.
So that's got to say yes. And apart from that, we use Facebook Messenger. So often get customer messages through Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp.
Okay. And then internally, you guys don't use Slack or Discord or any of the kind of messaging tools there?
No, we don't.
Okay.
Internally, we tend to use FaceTime for chats. And then I might use Zoom if it's any external meeting.
Yeah. Have you guys experimented with the FaceTime links that you can now set up and kind of you could add that to a meeting as here's a FaceTime link to join?
Not something I've tried out yet.
Okay. Yeah, I tried it for the first time last week and I was very impressed with how good it actually was. Someone was joining from a Windows computer and the link worked really well, and then you can manage if someone tried to join, you could approve or deny that person from entering, which was nice. And yeah, it seemed really well done for a version 1.
They seem to be getting on, moving it nearer to be able to provide all the facilities of Zoom, don't they? Yeah,
exactly. And then Center Stage is on both of your iPads. Has that been something you've noticed as being an improvement in your chatting?
It is. It's actually people find it quite amazing. I was only this last week on a video to my designer, Chuck Nichols in Oregon, and I was on there and a couple of the team, and we were moving in and out of the room. And he said, looking at on the other end, it was like he was actually in the meeting in the room because it felt much more sort of involved, and the fact it would zoom in on people as they moved into the room and all, he felt like it was being there. So it seems a great facility.
That's cool. Yeah. For the newsletter, what tool do you guys use for that?
Well, my marketer actually puts that together in Google Sheets, so I actually do use Google Sheets as well. So they'll send me a link through, and I'll put through suggested changes and such like.
Okay. Your notes to me had LumaFusion to do some video editing. What kind of work do you do there?
Business-wise, it's doing demonstration videos of the instrument. So I will be videoing an artist performing on the instrument and using LumaFusion to put the final video together that's going to go up on YouTube and on the website. And I also use it in my personal life I do quite a lot of drone flying and videoing with the drone. So I've got all those videos to edit and add music and such like.
Nice. And what's kind of the offload process to get footage into the iPad from the drone? Is it like an SD card you're importing?
Yes. I found the best way. You can do it other ways, but I found the easiest way is just to pull out the SD card from the drone and put it in obviously through an adapter into the dongle into the iPad Pro. Yeah.
For the musician videos, are you using iPhones to capture that, or do you have standalone cameras that you have on tripods?
I've got a Sony full frame camera that I use for that to take all the videos, and that works fine. So that goes the same as the drone videos. Use the transfer with the SD card.
Nice, yeah. And then for the audio itself, you're using any special microphones to capture that, or just whatever's with the camera?
I've got an external microphone mount on the camera.
Okay.
It's a Sony one that comes with the camera, so which works well.
Okay, and then it captures it alongside the video, so there's no sync you need to worry about later.
No.
Okay.
But LumaFusion, I'm very impressed with. It can do most things I want it to do. But I haven't found the need for anything more elaborate so far.
Yeah. No, it's great, and it's only going to get better. There's a multi-cam update they're working on that should be out this year at some point, I hope. They've been talking about it coming soon, and that will just be super impressive. So you could have multiple cameras set up and kind of cut between them pretty easily. Yeah,
it's so much better than iMovie, which is a very basic program, I think.
Yeah, I still miss iMovie HD back in the day when they had that for the Mac, and then they downgraded to this current iteration of iMovie.
Yeah.
So for product photography, that's something I would think is pretty important for this industry, because I know for me, lusting after a new shiny instrument was instrumental in me, wanting the saxophone I ended up getting. And what kind of challenges do you have photographing instruments and making them look good? And then do you do any of this, or is this kind of outsourced to someone else in your company?
The main problem with product photographs of musical instruments is that they're very shiny and reflections. If you don't watch it...
So you will be in them accidentally.
You end up getting a reflection of yourself.
Yeah, I'm looking at my Apple Watch, and I can see my face in it. So I'd imagine photographing anything shiny like that, you'd have your face reflecting right back at you.
So for years, I did use a professional photographer for doing the product photos, but that's quite an expensive thing, because every time you get a new instrument, you're paying several hundred. Yeah, just to come in and do some shots of it. So more recent times, because I've seen now they've done it a number of times, I now do the product photos myself using the Sony camera that I use for the videos. And basically, like a photo tent, the instrument's in a tent with the light outside shining in, and the camera is behind a screen, and so am I as well. Mm-hmm. So there's just a little black mark basically where the lens is pointing through into the tent to take the photo, and that can just be photoshopped out afterwards.
Will you use an iPad app to handle the post-production of the photos?
I will use Lightroom for basically like getting the exposures and all that sort of thing, and then Affinity Photo for cutting out and putting the backgrounds in, and further editing Affinity Photo.
Yeah. And do you have that product photography set up kind of ready to go whenever, or is this something you need to put together and get that tent set up, or do you have a special space kind of reserved for that already?
At the moment, it's set up all the time, because I've got it set up in what would normally be my showroom, because no one has been visiting to actually need a showroom. But,
right, yeah.
But otherwise, you can put it up in half an hour or whatever if you need to.
And something that stuck out to me, and kind of you sent me notes ahead of time, was the calculator app that you shared with me. I've never heard of this app, Tidelig. And how's this app different from the other ones out there? It looked kind of very interesting as I looked through the App Store description.
It's very different in the fact that rather than basically like a calculator, a regular calculator with just the numbers, you actually got a page. So you actually just keying in the figures in as if you were putting in there, the number multiplied by so-and-so equals. So you actually typing it in exactly as you would if you were doing it manually on a sheet of paper. And it will actually hold it on the page, and you can label the figures with what they actually represent. And that's what makes it different from other calculators, is the fact that you can label everything. So it's really good if you want to go back and check your calculations later. You can see exactly where all those figures came from, because you've labelled them up. And you've got all the calculations to go back and reference any time. So it's quite a different way of working from using a sort of normal calculator.
And will you use that split screen with numbers as you're in the spreadsheet working on things?
Yes, I will. And that will obviously be used for such things as working out product prices, putting all the figures in there and working out what the costs and the eventual sales price is.
Yeah, because you're building in margin and making sure it's appropriately priced there. Yeah.
So it's useful, and I can go back to the calculations, and if the figures change, I can just change one figure and get the new figure recalculated again. So I find it a really quite useful calculator app.
Yeah. So running a business, I'd imagine you'd have to keep track of a lot of little notes and just little data points that kind of come across your desk from time to time. How do you handle all these notes? Is there a certain notes app you use, or do you have different notes app depending on what kind of information you're being given?
No, I basically just use the built-in Apple Notes, because the search facility in there is really good. I can get back to what I'm looking for very quickly. So anytime I want to note anything down, I'll just do another note. Now, of course, we've got the new Quick Notes, which is even better still.
Yeah, you've been finding Quick Notes pretty useful?
Yes, that's really useful. If you've got a document open and just want to make a note on something.
Yeah, and you'll use the linking thing to it?
A link, or if you're on Safari to the page, it's really useful, I think.
The floating window I found it's just very useful having just instant access wherever you are on your system to that.
That's a really very nice facility. I hope Apple extends the potential of that in the future.
Agreed.
Maybe let you add new floating windows. You could maybe have swipe from the top right and have another floating window of your choice.
Yeah, no, that'd be amazing. Yeah. And then, do you use the Apple Pencil at all to do handwritten notes in any?
I use the Apple Pencil. Yes, I use it all the time for the music in Fourscore for annotating the music. That's a big use for it.
Yeah.
And business wise, I often use it for taking notes, handwritten notes of meetings or visits or whatever.
And the iPad being like this digital notebook, and something that I'd imagine you get a little bit of are papers, like physical papers. Do you have a process for getting rid of physical papers, get them into your iPad, and once they're there, do they just live in like the Files app, or do you use DevonThink or some other kind of data management tool to manage all that?
I like to keep the company as paperless as possible. So basically, anything that comes in on paper gets scanned in as soon as possible after it comes in. It'll either be in something like Xero if it's a receipt or needs to be in a particular app for use, or it will just go into a folder, and we basically just store them in a folder structure.
Yeah.
And we use share folders. So I'm using iCloud, use share folders. So if other people in the company need to access those documents, they can access them as well.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good way about it.
And that's a nice facility that they've added in the last few years.
Oh, it's super handy. Yeah. Shortcuts. Has that been something you've taken much advantage of?
Shortcuts I've used very little. I know lots of people love it, but I've had very little use for shortcuts. About the only thing I can think I use them for on a regular basis is to shrink the photos down to appropriate size to put on the website. So you can have a shortcut that go from the high resolution photo to a suitable size for uploading onto the web.
Yeah, I needed that exact ability the other day. I was submitting a rebate to T-Mobile for $100 off for the iPad, and they said, take a picture of the receipt, and I tried to upload it, and the only way I could get it uploaded was using shortcuts to down sample it.
Yeah. So that's a really useful facility of it, I think. And apart from that, I have a shortcut that just changes my wallpaper automatically.
Nice, yeah. I use shortcuts as well to automate my Apple Watch to change its watch face based on the focus mode I'm in. I found pretty useful.
Yeah, that's quite a good one.
How do you use the iPad in your personal life outside of Fourscore and the performing of music?
I use it quite a lot for watching YouTube and watching Netflix and things like that quite a lot. And just general browsing the web, and I'm not a great game player, but it's a really good leisure device that you can actually do whatever you like. And the great thing is that you can actually use it anywhere. When I'm traveling, I will, as a general rule, will download onto the iPad a whole load of videos and such like to watch while I'm on the move, particularly like on air flights. So I've got a whole library of things to watch.
Yeah, and the screen is just so good these days.
Yes.
So anything else? I should ask just briefly about the drones. Kind of what environments do you like to fly in, and what's kind of your goal with all of those?
I often visit quite about, we've got quite a lot of cool places in the UK, of castles and stately homes and things, so I quite often go and fly around those and to take videos. And I also, since I've been a teenager, I've been into steam trains, and I often video those, and you can get some real cool ones from the air. If they're not, and if the train's not moving fast, you can even follow it for long in the air, which is quite fun.
Yeah. Does the camera and those things capture a slow motion video if you wanted to?
Yes.
Okay, so if you see a train coming, you could just have it like hovering as it's coming by and get something pretty nice.
Yeah, and the drone I'm using now, which is the DJI Air 2S, can film in HLG, so I can do high dynamic range videos as well, which shot really well on the iPad Pro.
Oh, that's awesome! Yeah, when I first saw HDR video on the iPad, it just kind of blew my mind what this could do. And the 12 mini is the phone I have, and the video that thing captures with HDR Dolby Vision, it just blows my mind. I capture more videos because it just looks so incredible in HDR than I ever did before.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'll instead of doing a photo, sometimes I'll do a 10-second video just to capture the scene rather than a photo in some moments. So anything we haven't covered that you'd like to before we wrap it up?
Well, I think the only thing, quite amusing thing I would comment is that when I ever do use a Mac, I always seem to be reaching for the screen to do things. So I've got so used to touch screens now. I would not buy another Mac now unless Apple decides to put touch screens on them. Yeah,
I was going to ask anything about these M1 Macs that is attractive to you. It's bringing some of the characteristics of hardware from the iPad over, but
they're obviously great, and the software is a lot more flexible. What software you can use on them, but I wouldn't want the restrictions of having to do everything through a touchpad or a mouse. So I really do want to be touching the screen. Yeah,
and you can't rip the screen off. So if you rip it off, it's broken at that point.
Particularly if you're looking at photos or whatever, I just naturally reach for the screen to pinch, and it doesn't work on a Mac.
No.
Which is quite irritating.
Yep. Yeah, it sure is. Yeah. So, where can people find more information about the instruments you create?
Well, look at my website, which is Wessex-Tubas.com.
Excellent. And thank you so much. This has been just a fascinating chat, and it's always fun to chat with people running their businesses from iPad, especially a field such as music, which I'm so passionate about.
Well, yeah, and do you get any playing today, Tim?
It's less than it used to be, sadly. I still have my my nice saxophone here, but not as much as I should.
Yeah, well, it's a great thing to do.
It's very cathartic, playing an instrument.
To me, it's music's an integral part of my life.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Nice to speak to you.
Well, that was my discussion with Jonathan all about running Wessex Tubas from his iPad Pro. My thanks to Jonathan for his time recording this interview, and my thanks to you for your time and attention tuning in. As a reminder, you can support the podcast at patreon.com/iPadPros or by subscribing to the podcast on Apple Podcasts. With that, I'll talk to everyone again real soon.